speaker in this event, I accepted right off the bat. He really didn't have to make much of a pitch for me to get interested. Even though where I live, Myrtle Beach, is a fair distance from Wilson, my experience here has been anything but foul. All right, we got that out of the room. I thought I would start with a non-baseball story. This is something that I stumbled upon on Instagram recently, and I thought I'd share it with you. Albert Einstein was on an airplane, and he turned to the guy next to him, and he said, "You know, it's a long flight." He said, "Why don't we have a little competition?" He said, "I'll ask you a question. If you can't answer it, you give me $5. You ask me a question. If I can't answer it, I'll give you $500. Guy thinks that's a pretty good deal. So Einstein goes first, and he says, "How far is the Earth from the moon?" And the guy thinks about it a little bit, and he says, "I can't come up with an exact answer. Here's $5. Then he asks Einstein, "What goes up a hill with 3 legs and comes down with 4? Einstein racks his brain, thinks of all the science he knows. He can't come up with anything, so he gives him $500. Now it's Einstein's turn again, and he said, "Before I ask you my next question, what does go up a hill with 3 legs and comes down with 4? And the other guy reached in his pocket and gave him $5. I was born and raised in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and one of the memories I have is that for some reason somebody gave us a basketball backboard with no pole. So a friend of mine and I made up a game where the basketball backboard was the strike zone. The entire backboard was the strike zone. And you only got 1 strike per out, so any pitch that hit that backboard that you didn't hit, that was out. And there were 2 telephone poles on the boundary between our yard and the one next to us, and you had to hit the ball out of our yard between the 2 telephone poles to get a run. Anything else that was hit anywhere else was an out. Obviously, that kept the scores way down, but we had a lot of fun doing that. I also played a little bit of Little League, and there were A and B teams. The B team was the worst of the 2, and that's the one I excelled at the most. And I remember being the last hitter in the last inning, bases loaded, 2 out, full count, down by a run, and I struck out. And the manager immediately came up to me, put his hand on my shoulder, and said, "Don't worry about it, we'll get it next time." And I responded so much better to that approach than I did, feeling a lot of pressure, which is what the A team did. The first Major League Baseball game I attended was July 16, 1966, at Connie Mack Stadium in North Philadelphia. I went with a Cub Scout pack, so it was a group outing. And the starting pitchers, for those of you that are old like me, Bob Buell and Ray Sadecki. And we were in left field, and Jim Ray Hart was right in front of me. Willie Mays was to my left, and Willie McCovey was at first. And I don't think at that age I truly appreciated what I was in the midst of. The game went 15 innings, and the Cub Scout dads kept threatening after every extra inning, "If they don't score, we're going to leave." Never happened. Finally, in the bottom of the 15th, Tony Gonzalez singled home Bill White. Phillies won the game 6-5. The first game with my dad, just my dad, was August 6th of 67 versus the Astros. And they had a really neat train game package where one price, you took the train from Lancaster to North Philadelphia, and then that same price also covered the game ticket. We went down there, and the Astros leadoff hitter was a guy named Ron Davis. And he led off the game with a home run, and the Astros eventually went up 4-0 after 5. Well, I didn't want my dad to think I didn't appreciate him taking me to the game, even though I was very upset about the score. And so I kept thanking him through the game for taking me, that the score wasn't important, which I was lying through my teeth. So the Phillies come back to win that game 8-4, so now I didn't have to lie anymore. My first trip to Shea with my dad was in August of 73. And again, we were in left field, and Bud Harrelson hit the ball over Pete Rose's head right in front of me to win the game 2-1. Now, our family had just moved into a new apartment that weekend, and my mom was not too happy about the fact that Dad and I had vacated the premises and were not helping her to get settled in the new place, but she eventually did forgive us for that. 1965, the first year that I followed baseball, and I was a Phillies fan back then due to geographical proximity. And this was the year after the Phillies' epic collapse in 1964. They had a 6.5 game lead with 12 games to play. They lost 10 in a row and didn't go anywhere. So the first World Series that I remember was the Dodgers versus the Twins in '65. And despite losing the first two games, the Dodgers came back and won the series in 7. And Sandy Koufax's ERA for that World Series was 0.38. He got a hit and an RBI in Game 5, and I remember my dad going ballistic, saying, "Koufax never gets a hit." And I did some research and found out that he actually got 20 hits that year, so he wasn't quite as incompetent at the plate as we thought he was. In 1966, the Dodgers played the Orioles, and the Orioles swept that series 4-0. What I remember about that is in Game 1, Dave McNally, the starting pitcher for the Orioles, was struggling. He had given up 2 runs in the first 3 innings. So the Orioles replaced him with a guy named Mo Drabowski, who proceeded to pitch 6 2/3 innings, giving up 1 hit, no runs, and striking out 11. The Dodgers scored 1 in the second, 1 in the third, and they would not score again the entire World Series. They lost 5-2, 6-0, 1-0, and 1-0. And the Orioles as a team only hit 200, but their team ERA was 0.50. Sandy Koufax made his last appearance in that World Series and retired due to arthritis in his pitching elbow at the ripe young age of 30, which was a tragedy. Now, my dad was a Mets fan from their inception in 1962. He loved Casey Stengel, and I think he just liked rooting for the underdogs. And that was the year that Tom Seaver burst onto the scene. I really gravitated to Tom because he went about pitching in a very cerebral manner. Pitching was a science to him.
It's okay, he should have been.
And on top of that, he just seemed like a good guy. So here's the story that a lot of people don't know. The Braves drafted him in 1966 when he was at USC, signed him to a $40,000 contract. But Major League Baseball rules stated that a college player could not be signed once the season had started. So Seaver was prohibited from playing the rest of that season. And his father threatened to sue Major League Baseball over this. So the commissioner agreed to have a lottery for any team that wanted Seaver, and all they had to do was agree to pay at least the $40,000 that the Braves had offered. The Mets, Phillies, and Indians all expressed interest. They pulled a piece of paper out of the hat. The Mets got it, and that's how Tom Seaver became a Met. And of course, he won Rookie of the Year in 1967. And at the end of that year, the Mets, I guess it was sort of a player for a manager trade, got Gil Hodges to be their new manager. And Tom Seaver was quoted as saying many times that Gil Hodges single-handedly changed the Mets. He brought a level of professionalism to that team that had heretofore not been present. Now, I'm not going to go, I don't want you to get scared here. I think I'm going to go through every World Series, but